The first thing they teach you in critical care is how to accept the moments when life slips away. You're trained to trust the monitors, the flat lines, the silence. You learn to read the room long before anyone speaks, and you learn how to keep your hands steady even when your heart isn't. But on February 9th, 2025, inside the trauma wing of Harbor Crest Medical Center in Washington, I witnessed something no training, no handbook, and no senior nurse could ever prepare me for. Something that changed how I understood life, death, and the thin, fragile space that exists between them. My name is Marissa Hale, and I've spent 12 years working as an ICU nurse. I have seen everything from sudden collapses to slow, painful goodbyes. I've seen cases that dragged on for weeks and cases that ended before I could chart the first note. But nothing, absolutely nothing, comes close to what happened that morning. It all began with a patient who should never have been a mystery. A man admitted for a routine abdominal procedure, expected to be in and out by the end of the week. He was calm, cooperative, and medically stable. There was nothing unusual about him. No complications, nor unusual readings. Nothing that hinted at the storm that was quietly building around him. But within hours, everything shifted. His condition changed so suddenly it forced the entire medical team into motion. What started as a simple procedure spiraled into a situation none of us recognized. We monitored him, we pushed every measure we could, but the decline was sharp and unexplained, and when his heart finally stopped, we did everything we were trained to do. We followed protocol, but the room felt silent in that familiar, painful way. Eventually, we had no choice but to call the time, and I remember standing right beside him, holding the clipboard, preparing to chart those final moments, believing the case was over, but it wasn't. Because 11 minutes after we declared him gone, he came back to life. And he wasn't the same. Not even close. His name was Caleb Rourke, a 64-year-old retired aviation mechanic. A calm, polite man who moved slowly, spoke gently, and carried the kind of quiet confidence that comes from a lifetime of solving practical problems. His medical chart was clean, cleaner than most patients of his age. Nothing alarming, hidden, that should have raised even the smallest concern. He was admitted for a simple heart valve repair, the kind of procedure our team could perform with steady hands and clear minds. A case we could have managed even on our busiest days. We expected him to recover smoothly and return home before the weekend. Caleb smiled often and never complained. He told me about his daughter, Lila, who lived 2 hours away, and called him every evening just to make sure he remembered to rest. He also talked about his promise to start cooking healthier meals once he got home. He joked that if he didn't, Lila would drive down and confiscate every frying pan he owned. Everything about him felt ordinary in the best way. Steady vitals, stable readings, a calm demeanor. He was the kind of patient every nurse appreciated. Grateful, patient, and easy to care for. Nothing in his behavior or condition hinted at danger. Nothing suggested that in less than 2 days, he would become the center of one of the strangest medical puzzles our hospital had ever faced. But when I look back now, there were signs, quiet ones, small details that seemed harmless at the time but carry a different weight when I remember them now. A moment when he paused mid-sentence, staring at the wall as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Another time when he flinched, claiming he felt a strange pull in his chest, though every monitor showed normal rhythms. At the time, I dismissed these moments as nerves perfectly understandable before surgery. But they weren't nerves, they were warnings, clues I didn't recognize until everything started falling apart, clues that made far more sense after the chaos that would follow. And if I had noticed them sooner, things might have been different. The first disturbance happened during one of the quietest hours of the night. I was finishing Caleb's chart when his heart monitor jumped sharply, a quick spike that shouldn't have been there. It lasted less than a second before settling back into a steady rhythm. Nothing alarming, but unusual enough to make me walk into his room. When I entered, Caleb was already awake. He wasn't restless or confused. He was staring at the far corner of the wall with a focus that made the entire room feel colder. I asked him if he was all right, and he took a moment before answering. His eyes stayed fixed on that corner as he whispered, almost cautiously, "Marissa, do you hear that tapping?" I listened carefully. There was nothing. No footsteps in the hallway, no equipment malfunction, nothing that matched what he described. But Caleb wasn't acting like someone imagining things. His attention was too sharp, too precise, as though the sound was moving around him. Before I could reassure him, the tapping he described appeared again, but not in the air. It showed up on the monitor. His heartbeat shifted into a strange rhythm. 2 quick pulses, a brief pause, then 1 long beat. The sequence repeated with an almost deliberate pattern, like someone tapping on a door with intention. I checked every cable, lead, and machine in his room. Everything was working flawlessly. The rhythm wasn't a glitch. It was coming from Caleb's heart. He watched the monitor with a kind of uneasy recognition, like the pattern was something he had heard long before this night. His breathing stayed normal, but his eyes narrowed as he whispered, "It's the same sound." He didn't explain what he meant, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The pattern shifted again, slower this time, heavier, almost responding to something I couldn't see. The atmosphere in the room changed with it. The air felt still, dense, as if the space itself was waiting for something to happen. I stepped closer and asked if he was in pain. He shook his head without looking at me, and murmured, "It's getting closer." I didn't understand what he meant, but the way he said it made the hair on my arms stand upright. This wasn't a typical arrhythmia. It wasn't stress, it wasn't confusion. Something was affecting him in a way I couldn't explain. The tapping rhythm continued for several seconds before fading out completely, leaving the room silent again. Caleb exhaled slowly, like the moment had passed but not ended. I wanted to call on Dr. Smith, but something in me hesitated. Not because I doubted what I saw, but because it felt like this was only the beginning of something larger. And it was. This was the first disturbance, the first crack in a case that would unravel everything I thought I understood, and looking back, I wish I had known how much worse it was going to get. 1 second, Caleb was resting quietly in his bed, and the next, he jolted upright with a sharp gasp, clutching his chest as if an invisible force had gripped him. His body fell back against the pillows, and the room shifted from calm to chaos instantly. His monitor erupted in a rising scream of alarms. His heartbeat surged into a frantic rhythm, his blood pressure fell in a straight drop, and his oxygen level kept sinking as if something was draining it faster than we could replace it. My colleague Nurse Whitney sprinted into the room with her emergency cart when she heard and saw changing in the monitor after I had gone out for my lunch break. More staff rushed in behind her. The code blue call echoing down the hallway. The air felt charged, almost tense enough to touch. We delivered the first shock. His body reacted, but weakly. A second shock followed, offering a brief flicker of hope. For a heartbeat-long moment, Caleb returned. His eyes lifted halfway, unfocused, yet aware enough to find me. "Don't let them take me." The words were soft, but chilling, and they didn't sound like fear of dying. They sounded like fear of something or someone closing in on him. Before I could ask what he meant, his pulse faded. He slipped back into stillness, and the alarms roared all over again. We fought to bring him back. Chest compressions, medications, repeated shocks, every tool we had, every skill we trusted, every second that normally made a difference. But nothing changed. His body stopped responding as if a wall had shut us out. When his pupils stopped reacting and his skin grew colder, the room started to accept what we didn't want to believe. The attending finally gave the call. Caleb was gone. The team slowly stepped out of the room. I kept staring at the monitor, puzzled, confused, almost refusing to look away. That was when the first sign appeared. Instead of shutting down, the monitor displayed a strange pattern. It wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't a glitch. It looked intentional. A clean, repeating formation, almost identical to the odd rhythm we had seen earlier that night. The same rhythm Caleb reacted to, the same pattern he claimed he heard as tapping. I leaned closer. This shouldn't be showing. No medical procedures could explain what I was seeing. The pattern didn't belong to any rhythm we recognized. It looked more like something trying to communicate through the machine that had been connected to him. Then the room shifted again. The overhead lights dimmed for a fraction of a second, and returned stronger, almost too bright. A low clicking sound echoed from inside the wall behind Caleb's bed, steady, sharp, and unnatural. I froze. The sound matched his description perfectly. The tapping was real, and it didn't stop when Caleb died. It grew louder. As Elle stood there, the monitor's strange pattern repeated again, clearer than before, as if whatever had its hold on Caleb was still in the room with me, watching, waiting, or trying to be understood. "Who did he mean?" Elle asked, barely above a whisper. "Who's trying to take him?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing with complete certainty: Caleb wasn't imagining the tapping, and he wasn't speaking out of fear or confusion. Something had been close to him long before he collapsed, something we couldn't see, and whatever "them" meant, we hadn't seen the last of it. Then, in the middle of that silence, a single sound cut through the room: the monitor beep. I stopped. Another beep followed, slow, steady, deliberate, like a heartbeat tapping its way back into the world. I turned toward the monitor, the same monitor that had shown nothing but a flat line minutes earlier, and watched a new rhythm form across the screen. A strong, even pulse, one that didn't belong to the dead. My hands went cold. I couldn't move at first. I just stared, waiting for the machine to correct itself, glitch, or shut down. But the rhythm stayed perfectly normal. Then I heard something else. A breath. Caleb's chest lifted, then lowered, then lifted again. Calm, controlled, alive. The shock broke my stillness. I called for help, and within seconds, the room filled with doctors and staff. No one had an explanation. They checked the wires, the monitor, the leads, everything. But the truth was right there in front of us. Caleb Rourke, the man we had declared dead, had returned with a stronger heartbeat than he had before the collapse. When his eyes opened, the room froze. Dr. Smith expected disorientation, panic, confusion, but that wasn't what he saw. His eyes held a depth that didn't belong to this world. They were sharp and distant at the same time, like he was looking through us rather than at us, like he had seen something no one should ever witness and wasn't sure how much to reveal. I called his name, but he didn't respond right away. He scanned the ceiling, then the corners of the room, as if searching for something only he could sense. When his gaze finally settled on me, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. His expression wasn't frightened, it was watchful, almost cautious, like he had returned with knowledge he didn't trust the world with. What unsettled me most wasn't that he came back. It was the way he seemed to know he would. One of the doctors asked him how he was feeling. Caleb blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream he wasn't sure was over. His voice, when it came, was quiet but firm, as if he was choosing each word with purpose. "I remember everything." That wasn't normal. Patients who come back after minutes without a heartbeat usually wake up confused or exhausted. But Caleb was absolutely normal. Like he had been waiting for this exact moment, counting down the breaths until he returned. The staff exchanged worried looks, whispering theories that didn't fit the facts. But I noticed something none of them did. Caleb kept glancing at the doorway, like he expected someone to walk in at any second, or something. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. "Caleb, what happened to you?" He didn't answer at first. He pressed his palm against the blanket, grounding himself, and let out a slow exhale. Then he spoke with a calmness that didn't match the fear in his eyes. "I wasn't alone." The room went silent. Even the machines felt quieter. Before I could ask anything else, the hallway lights flickered, just once, a soft, quick dimming. But whatever it was, Caleb reacted instantly, his head turned sharply toward the door, his whole posture tightening, like he recognized the flicker. He whispered, almost too softly to hear, "It found me." The hairs on the back of my neck rose. This wasn't just a medical miracle. This was something else, something we weren't prepared for. And deep inside, I knew Caleb hadn't returned the same way he left. Something had crossed back with him. So I gave him a sedative injection, and he fell asleep. 3 hours later, when he was awake, Elle knew something had changed. His expression wasn't blank or confused. There was no panic, no struggle to breathe, no sign of weakness. He was looking so calm. I asked him how he felt. Instead of answering, he looked straight at me, almost like he had been waiting for that question. "I know where I went," he said quietly. Those words pulled every bit of sound out of the room. The doctors froze. No one spoke. We all expected confusion or memory gaps, but he spoke like someone who had just returned from a place he fully understood. He continued before anyone could say a word. "I wasn't lost. I saw everything clearly." His tone was steady, almost too controlled. It didn't match someone who had just come back from cardiac death. And his eyes, they held something heavy, like he was carrying information none of us could imagine. He described waking up in a place that didn't feel like a dream, more like stepping into another level of awareness. He remembered details he shouldn't have been able to recall, sounds, shapes, a feeling of being observed, as if something there recognized him before he recognized it. Then he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "I wasn't supposed to come back." The air tightened. One of the doctors stepped closer, ready to interrupt, but Caleb kept speaking with a calmness that didn't match the tension building around us. "Something noticed me while I was gone," he said, "and when I returned, it didn't stay behind." A quiet chill moved through the room, not fear, but the uneasy sense that he wasn't talking in metaphors. He sounded certain, like he was giving a report, not telling a story. I asked what he meant, but he didn't answer directly. He just said, "You'll see it soon. It doesn't like being ignored." The doctors exchanged glances again, some skeptical, others unsettled. They tried to shift the conversation, asking about pain, dizziness, or memory loss. But he kept circling back to one idea, repeating it with calm clarity. Whatever he encountered hadn't been finished with him. The rest of the day, his behavior stayed the same, focused, alert, almost too aware of his surroundings. He watched shadows on the walls, as if tracking movement. He turned his head before anyone entered the room, like he sensed them ahead of time. And every few minutes, he'd glance toward the corner near the window, studying something none of us could see. By evening, I felt a quiet pressure in the room too, like the air had gained weight. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me check over my shoulder more than once. The next 4 days brought a quiet unease that settled around Caleb Rourke's room. Nothing dramatic happened at first, just enough strange moments to raise the hairs on my neck. The lights dimmed at odd intervals, like something passed through them. Cold air drifted across the room even though the vents weren't running, and the monitors beside his bed glitched only when he was near them. Caleb felt it too. He kept telling me he wasn't alone, that something hovered just out of sight. He said it watched him when he tried to rest. His voice never shook, but his eyes said enough. Each night, a soft knocking came from behind his wall, slow and steady. It moved sometimes, sliding along the drywall, as if something were searching for a spot to break through. I heard it myself more than once, and no one could explain it. The doctors had excuses for everything: faulty wiring, old pipes, stress, but none of their answers matched what I saw, or what I felt. One night, the sound shifted closer, sliding behind the headboard. Caleb's face tightened. He whispered, "It's trying to find me." Before I could call for help, the room went dim for a heartbeat. When the lights returned, Caleb was staring into the far corner, eyes wide and unblinking. "What is it?" I asked. He swallowed. "The same thing that followed me back." The room turned colder. Not from an event, this was deeper, heavier, like something unseen had stepped inside with us. That sudden stillness felt like a warning, a pause before something worse. And for the first time, I knew Caleb wasn't imagining anything. Something had returned with him. And it wasn't done. While updating Caleb Rourke's chart at Redwood Valley Medical Center, something unusual appeared on the screen. A locked folder was attached to his digital record. It wasn't part of any standard file structure, and it carried a label you almost never see: restricted access. My first thought was that it had been added by mistake, but the more I stared at it, the more uneasy I felt. Folders like that hide things someone doesn't want found. I opened it. Inside was a report from Harbor Crest Medical Center in Utah, dated 3 years earlier. The file described an event that sounded too familiar to ignore. Caleb had collapsed during a routine checkup. His heart stopped. Medical staff tried to revive him, but nothing worked. They prepared to call the time of death, and then, without warning, his heart restarted on its own. He woke minutes later with clear speech, steady breathing, and no physical signs of trauma. No brain damage, no organ stress, nothing that matched someone who had come back from the edge. But the part that made my hands go cold wasn't the medical miracle, it was the notes that followed. Nurses at that hospital reported that Caleb became restless at night. He told them he sensed someone standing near him when the room was empty. He said he felt followed, even with his eyes open. The staff logged several strange incidents. Temperature drops around his bed, machines malfunctioning only when he was in the room, and brief moments where he seemed to listen to something no one else heard. Every detail matched what I had seen here. But there was something else, something I didn't expect. The Utah team suggested that Caleb's collapse might not have been caused by a heart issue at all. They believed something triggered it from outside normal medical explanations, but the report ended abruptly, with no conclusion. Someone had closed the file before the final assessment was written. As I scrolled through the last page, a single line stood out. Patient shows signs of repeated episodes linked to unknown stimuli. Recommend monitoring for future recurrences. Future recurrences, meaning they expected this to happen again, meaning they knew it wasn't over. I shut the file, feeling the weight of a truth I didn't want to accept. Whatever happened to Caleb before had returned, and it wasn't stopping, not this time. The pattern was repeating itself, and we were already too deep to step back. Caleb Rourke's last night in the ICU felt heavier than the others. The air was still, almost too quiet, as if the entire ward was holding its breath. He asked me to sit beside him, his voice low and steady but filled with something I couldn't name. I pulled a chair close to his bed, expecting the usual questions about his symptoms. Instead, he looked at me with a kind of fear I had never seen in him. He said he needed to finally tell the truth, something he had hidden from everyone, even during his first collapse at the hospital in the U.S. 3 years ago, he took a slow breath, gathering courage, then whispered that when his heart stopped the first time, he didn't see what people usually describe. There wasn't light or darkness. He said he stood between two paths. One felt calm, almost warm. The other held a presence he couldn't fully explain, something that existed beyond the world we know. He paused, staring at the ceiling as if he feared something might be listening. Then, he said the second path wasn't empty. He saw figures still, silent, watching him with an attention that felt wrong. He couldn't see their faces, but he felt their focus, as if they recognized him, as if they had been waiting. Caleb admitted that during his first revival, one of those figures didn't remain on the other side. It followed him back. He said he never understood how, but after that day, he felt connected to something that didn't belong here. Every close call, every moment when his pulse slipped, that connection seemed to tighten around him. He described it like a shadow that moved when he didn't, a presence that lingered behind him even when he stood alone. His hands shook slightly as he continued. Each time he survived, he felt less alone in the worst possible way. He believed that whatever had attached itself to him wasn't simply observing, it was waiting for the right moment to claim what it considered unfinished. Then Caleb shared something he had never admitted to anyone. The strange whispers he heard at night weren't hallucinations. He believed they came from that same presence. Some nights, he said he heard it standing by his door. Other nights, it felt closer, so close he could sense breath he couldn't see. As he spoke, the monitors around him stayed steady, yet the air in the room felt colder. I noticed him glance over my shoulder a few times, as if someone else might be standing behind me. I checked each time, but no one was there. His voice broke slightly as he looked at me again. He said the connection was reaching its limit, and if his heart failed one more time, he feared the presence would not let go. Not this time. Not ever. Then, he gave me a request that sent a chill all the way through me. "Marissa," he whispered, "if I die again, don't bring me back." The room was silent after that. No alarms, no footsteps in the hallway, just his words clinging to the air like smoke. And beneath his voice, I felt something else in the room. Something I could not explain. Something that made me wonder if Caleb was right and if he wasn't the only one being watched. 2 weeks after Caleb Rourke went home, his wife called the hospital asking to speak with me. I could hear the strain in her voice before she even explained why. She told me Caleb passed away in his sleep peacefully, without pain, without any sign that something was wrong. There was no medical cause, no distress. He simply drifted off and didn't return. His wife said their 2 children had woken in the night and gone to her room, saying they felt uneasy, though they couldn't explain why. They just said the house felt different. She didn't think much of it until morning. When she entered the bedroom, the first thing she saw was the clock on his nightstand. It had stopped in the middle of the night, the hands frozen as if the batteries had given out at the exact same moment he passed. Next to it was a drawing Caleb had been working on the evening before. It showed the same 2 paths he once described to me at the hospital, one calm, one unclear. But this time, the sketch looked gentler, almost peaceful, like he had finally understood something he couldn't explain while he was alive. His wife said he had been quieter at home, more thoughtful, not afraid, just reflective, as if he was trying to prepare his family for something he felt inside but couldn't put into words. He held his children longer at bedtime. He sat beside his wife without speaking, just holding her hand. Listening to her tell the story, I felt a mix of sadness and comfort. Whatever he faced, he didn't face it alone. His last days were spent surrounded by the people he loved most. After that call, I stepped away from the ICU for a while. I told the staff it was burnout. But really, I just needed space to think, to breathe, to let go of the case that stayed with me long after Caleb left our care. Some nights now, when my apartment turns unusually quiet, I find myself thinking about him. Not in a fearful way, more like remembering someone who carried a story he never fully got to share. Even now, I can't explain what happened to him, but I know it changed the way I look at life, second chances, and the mysteries we may never fully understand. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.